I'm a cop down in South Jersey, and I've been at this gig since I was 23. For the most part, it's not as thrilling as people make it out to be. In my county, things are usually pretty calm. The worst calls we usually get are just disturbances or the occasional shoplifting, with something more serious happening once in the blue moon. Over the years, I've worked every possible shift you can think of, but one night shift still stands out in my mind. It was one of those quiet nights, no calls coming in. I was cruising down a deserted road with no streetlights, just woods on both sides. Suddenly, I saw the faint reflection of taillights approaching from the right side of the road on the grass. As I got closer, I noticed that the driver's side door was wide open. My instinct was to veer onto the grass, preparing to offer assistance to the driver. But as I slowed down, something peculiar happened. A figure stepped out of the car, hesitated by the door for a moment, then sprinted into the nearby woods. My heart raced as I radioed in for a suspicious person or vehicle, and I got out of my car, flashlight in hand, and my other hand ready on my holster, just in case. In this line of work, you gotta expect the worst. I cautiously approached the car, glancing inside, half expecting to see someone else seated there, but the car was empty, except for a horrendous stench that hit me like a wave. It smelled like something rotting. I called out into the woods, asking if anyone needed help. Waving my flashlight around, I ventured closer to the tree line. There was no response, just silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves. I returned to the car to investigate further. Inside on the passenger side, I found multiple blood-soaked tissues and paper towels strewn across the floor and rear seats. They were saturated with dark red blood. While examining the car, I heard footsteps in the woods behind me. I spun around with my flashlight, yelling, "Come out of the woods!" But I didn't see anyone. Someone was definitely hiding, though. I knew that for sure when I heard a deep, unfamiliar voice beyond the trees. I couldn't make out what the voice was saying, but I shouted back, "Show yourself! Are you hurt?" As I cautiously approached, repeating my questions, there was still no response. The voice I heard didn't sound like someone in pain or distress. Besides, why would they run into the woods upon seeing a police car? Something didn't add up. I headed back to the car and called for backup. While inspecting the vehicle more closely, I noticed it had no license plate. When I returned to the rear seats, I discovered something that nearly made me sick to my stomach. It was a heavy object wrapped in bloodied paper towels. With gloved hands, I unwrapped it to reveal a severed hand, its dark red color making it hard to identify it at first glance. The situation escalated quickly. I radioed in that there might have been a murder, urgently requesting backup. I activated my cruiser's lights to make my location more visible to others. When backup arrived, we conducted an extensive search of the woods, looking for any sign of blood trails. Strangely, there were none, not even leading away from the car. This meant that the hand on the blood-soaked tissues might not have belonged to the person who had fled into the woods. Hours upon hours passed as we combed through the area, but we found nothing. The stolen vehicle was traced back to a nearby town resident who claimed no knowledge of the car's theft. We collected fingerprints from the steering wheel and conducted DNA tests on the severed hand, but there was no match in the database. To this day, we've made no progress in identifying the driver of that car or whose severed hand it was. My partner and I were assigned to a unit in the sheriff's department that dealt with monitoring individuals wearing ankle monitors. One night, while tracking someone who had violated their parole, we traced their last known location to a rather shady area in our county. Not many stops in our line of work are routine, but this one was unsettling from the get-go. My partner approached the front door while I positioned myself to cover the side of the house, keeping a close eye on him and the side of the building. After knocking on the door, we heard movement inside. and as the door creaked open, a middle-aged woman slowly peered out, her gaze locking onto me. What was strange was that most people would answer at the front door, not immediately looking to the side of the house. She mumbled something about Camille, the person that we were searching for, and let us in. But then things took an eerie turn. Instead of standing up or engaging in conversation, she dropped to her hands and knees and began crawling on the floor, repeatedly calling out for Camille. It was clear that the woman had serious mental issues, and we suspected that Camille might be her caretaker. As we cautiously searched the house, she continued to crawl on the floor, following us silently. The time was around 8 p.m., and the house was eerily dark inside. There were no TVs or electronic devices. It had an unusual layout, with about 4 bedrooms spread across 2 floors. Every time I exited the room, I felt disoriented, like I had entered a different part of the house. The woman occasionally appeared right behind me without making a sound. At one point, we entered what looked like an upstairs bedroom, but when we tried to open the door, it was sealed, as if it had been painted shut. After some effort, we managed to open it, revealing not bedrooms, but an attic filled with insulation. It was as if we had stepped into another dimension. As we inspected the attic, it resembled something out of a horror movie. It was filled with storage insulation and an old-style light bulb with a hanging string. The woman remained at the bottom of the stairs, still crawling and calling for Camille. After what felt like hours of searching the house over and over, we called it a day and cleared the property. As we drove away, the woman was now standing at the front door, staring at us. According to the timeline, we were there for only 20 minutes, but it felt like much longer. We never returned to that house, and the eerie feeling of that night still lingers in my memory. Working as a police officer often means dealing with bizarre situations, but one late-night call will always stand out. It was past midnight when the dispatcher relayed a distress call from a woman who sounded terrified. She claimed someone was in her house, and she needed help immediately. My partner and I rushed to the scene, our hearts pounding as we approached the dark, isolated house. The woman had given us her address, and it was located far away from the nearest neighbors. The only illumination came from the moonlight, casting eerie shadows. We cautiously entered the house, finding the front door ajar. Our flashlights cut through the darkness as we made our way through the hallway, following the sound of a woman's panicked voice. She had herself barricaded in a bedroom. When we arrived at the door, she begged us to stay with her and said that she heard strange noises throughout the night, like whispers and footsteps. We assured her that we would stay and investigate. My partner took the lead, moving quietly through the house while I stayed with the woman. We kept in contact via our radios. As we searched room by room, there was no sign of an intruder. The house appeared undisturbed, and there were no open doors or windows. Then, as my partner reached the basement, his voice crackled over the radio. "I found something." I stayed with the woman, keeping her calm, while my partner descended into the basement. Moments later, he returned, holding a small, old-fashioned music box. It looked out of place among the modern surroundings. As he wound the music box, a haunting melody filled the room. The woman's eyes widened in terror as she recognized the tune. It was her mother's favorite song, a song she hadn't heard since her mother's death years ago. We tried to comfort her, explaining that it might have been a cruel prank, but she was inconsolable. She insisted on leaving the house immediately, and we escorted her out to the patrol car. While we waited for her family to arrive and stay with her, we conducted a thorough search of the property. No one was found, and there was no evidence of forced entry. We never discovered who had played that eerie tune on the music box or how it wound up in her basement. One summer afternoon, we received a frantic call from a family reporting their father missing. The man had gone hiking alone in a nearby forest earlier that day and hadn't returned as planned. The family was distraught, fearing that he might have been injured or lost in the dense woods. My partner and I quickly organized a search party, and we set out for the forest. The dense trees cast long shadows as we ventured deeper into the wilderness. The family provided us with their father's last known location, and we began our search from there. Hours passed with no signs of the missing man. We called out his name repeatedly, our voices echoing through the forest, but there was no response. The sun was beginning to set, and we grew increasingly concerned for his safety. Just as we were about to expand the search area, my partner stumbled upon a small, weathered cabin hidden among the trees. It was an odd discovery, as the family hadn't mentioned any cabins in the area. We cautiously approached, announcing ourselves as police officers. The cabin's door was slightly ajar, and an eerie silence hung in the air. Inside, we found no signs of a struggle, but the place appeared abandoned, covered in dust and cobwebs. It was as if time had stood still in the cabin. We continued our search around the cabin, hoping to find a clue about the missing man's whereabouts. As we explored the perimeter, we noticed a peculiar detail: a row of freshly dug, shallow graves behind the cabin, each marked with its own wooden cross. Our hearts raced as we realized the implications. We needed to search the graves, but the thought of what we might find was chilling. As we started digging, we uncovered small, shallow wooden boxes. Inside each box were photographs of individuals, all unidentified. At that moment, our radios cracked to life, and we received an urgent call from the family. They had located their father near a different part of the forest, safe but disoriented. Relieved, we rushed to reunite him with his family. But the mystery of the cabin and the photographs remained unsolved. We reported our findings to the higher-ups, and the investigation to the eerie cabin deep in the woods began. To this day, the origin and purpose of those shallow graves and the haunting photographs remain a mystery that continues to send shivers down our spines.